BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello and welcome to the Farming Today podcast with me, Charlotte Smith. In this episode, the move away from lead shot to alternatives and why it doesn't seem to be happening.
The manufacturers are not selling much at the moment simply because shooters don't want to buy it, because they want to carry on shooting in the way they have been doing for 150 years.
More on the latest research and the view from the British Association for Shooting and Conservation later. First, around 9 out of 10 farming businesses use contractors. These are firms which offer seasonal or specialised services, from hedge cutting to manure spreading, or which even do all the farming on behalf of the landowner. This week, we're going to look at contractors, so let's start by hearing from one of the most famous, Caleb Cooper, the contractor on Jeremy Clarkson's Diddley Squat Farm in the Cotswolds. We're walking past a tractor with Caleb Cooper Contracting.
Yeah.
Written on it. So that's your business?
Yeah.
And you look after how many other farms?
So looking after roughly 20.
And that's just you, or is there more of you?
There's a team of, I've got seven, yeah. So we're doing 3,500 acres of arable land, from like stubble to stubble. Or just get called up to go and combine a field or plant a field for somebody. And then we're doing about 60, I think last year we spread 65,000 tonnes of solid manure. So I've got two K2 bio spreaders with weigh scales, variable rates, so I can actually positionally spread muck. And then we do slurry spreading. I've just bought a fusion baler actually.
What does that do?
So basically it's a round baler, but on the back of the round baler is actually a wrapper. I'm thinking, look, I've got one tractor, I've got a baler and a wrapper joined together, or do I have two tractors, a baler and a wrapper? You're cutting your costs if you have one man doing that or one woman doing that. So we're doing about 2,500 acres of silage each year. What else are we doing? Hedge cutting, of course, haymaking. We probably haymake about 800 acres. It's quite the operation.
Yeah, I'm a bit tired just listening to it, frankly. What's more important to you, the business or the business of telly?
My business. I started Caleb Cooper Contracting Limited at age 16. That is what pays me.
What doesn't telly pay?
It pays, but that is the one thing I want. Because that's one that interests me more than anything else. But two, I built that from 16, so it means something to my heart.
Caleb Cooper talking to me last year. Well, for him, contracting was a way into farming without needing to buy land. But Jill Hewitt, the CEO of the National Association of Agricultural Contractors, told me becoming a contractor can still require a big investment.
You could literally be one man and his dog with some sheep shearing equipment. So there's sort of that end of the scale, I suppose. But then when you're getting into some of the bigger operations, you're potentially talking about millions of pounds worth of kit when, you know, at the bigger scale of contracting.
So how does the business model here work? Obviously, if you're, for instance, hedge cutting, presumably you get paid by the metre of hedge. But if you're growing crops on a contract, do you just get a fixed sum for the contract, or do you get a percentage of what those crops are then sold for?
Yeah, it varies. So things like hedge cutting would probably be on an hourly rate. Then a lot of operations will be charged per acre or per hectare. Some would then also be charged by the tonne, perhaps if they were spreading waste to land. So it varies, really. And then some will have what we call contract farming agreements, where perhaps they will take a lead role in the management and they will be in charge of all the operations across the whole farm.
And that's ideal, obviously, for either a farmer who's on the brink of retiring or for somebody, a landowner who doesn't really want to farm. But with a farmer who is farming who then uses a contractor, why would you bring somebody else in and have to pay them?
Very often now it's to do with the cost of machinery. But there are a lot of reasons. Contractors are on and off a lot of farms, so they tend to be highly skilled and trained individuals. So an operation perhaps like crop spraying, where you need to keep up with your CPD and you need to be up with the latest information, that's a really good operation to bring a contractor in. Something like sugar beet harvesting, for example, where machinery is really expensive to buy a sugar beet harvester or a combine or a forager or something like that. It's prohibitive if you've got a limited amount of acres, whereas a contractor will be doing that same operation over a number of farms. So it makes it more viable financially.
One of the things that people often worry about with contract farmers is that they're a bit less invested in the future and particularly in the sustainability side of things because they're just there to do a job and go. Is that fair?
I would say the opposite, to be honest. I am constantly surprised by how innovative and forward-thinking contractors are, because they've not had access to farm payments in the past, as perhaps farmers have. So they need to be very business-minded. They need to be looking to the future. They need to be looking what tech is coming and what their customers will be wanting.
Jill Hewitt. A voluntary agreement to phase out lead shot isn't working, according to a study by researchers at Cambridge University. They bought pheasants from butchers, game dealers and supermarkets across Britain this season and found that of the 171 found to contain shot, 99% contained lead. Well, that's despite a voluntary agreement in 2020, whereby UK shooting organisations agreed to phase out the use of lead shot, which is toxic, and move to alternatives like steel shot by this year. Emeritus Professor Rhys Green from the University of Cambridge's Department of Zoology says their study, which began in 2021, shows that in the years since then, 94 to 99% of pheasants they examined where shot was found were killed with lead shot. And that, he says, is bad for wildlife and humans.
It's been known for well over a century that it's a problem for wildlife, particularly birds. Most of the shot fired from shotguns doesn't hit a bird. It falls down onto the soil, and birds going around looking for seeds and also for grit take it in and they get poisoned. And then there's also a problem with vulnerable groups of humans. The development of the nervous system is affected even by quite low levels of lead absorbed from the diet.
Now, your sample size is pretty small, 171 pheasants, some 18 million odd are killed every year.
It's about 15 million, actually. But if you know your statistics, Charlotte, you'll know that because that sample is collected from many businesses across the whole of Britain, it's actually a very good sample size. So I do reject your implication this is an inadequate sample. I think that's just incorrect.
And so you would reckon from this that although people have talked about other types of shot, for whatever reason, they're simply not using it?
They're not using it for shooting pheasants. And we've recently shown in another recently published paper that they're not using non-lead at all for shooting red grouse, or at least we couldn't detect any in the sample we took. And so it's clearly not being used by that set of shooters. We know that for people who shoot ducks and other wildfowl, where they are legally obliged to use non-lead ammunition, that about 30% of them shoot with non-lead ammunition. So there are a lot of people out there who are experienced with shooting with non-lead ammunition. And indeed, organisations like the British Association for Shooting and Conservation have been helping shooters to understand how best to do shooting with non-lead ammunition for a very long time. There's no shortage, actually, of suitable information, but there is not much market for it. So the manufacturers are not selling much at the moment simply because shooters don't want to buy it, because they want to carry on shooting in the way they have been doing for 150 years.
Professor Rhys Green. Terry Behan is Deputy Director of Shooting and Operations for the British Association for Shooting and Conservation, BASC.
The first point that I would say that significant progress has actually been made.
Well, hang on a minute, because this report would suggest that very little progress has been made.
Indeed. And what I would say to that is it's slightly disappointing that we would create such a big statement based on such a little sample of birds. Obviously, as you would know, is that lead shot, it isn't illegal to use currently. And therefore, people would still be using it. The significant progress that actually has been made, we've now got more than 150 types of steel shot cartridges with sustainable wads, because we don't want to be putting plastic into the countryside.
But if you look at these figures since 2020, when shooting organisations did agree to move to alternatives by 2025, that shows that the lowest it ever was 94% of pheasants.
The whole idea of the voluntary transition was, of course, we want people to move away from lead shot. Of course we do. However, we want to avoid a cliff edge. So trying to avoid a cliff edge means that we can continue to shoot, we can continue to undertake the conservation of work that we do. The volunteers get to go out and do all the social aspects in the countryside of which we love. And to emphasise that slightly further, the Health and Safety Executive have just undertaken a public consultation under the UK REACH. And they also believe that it can't be an outright ban. And they have put a timeline of 5 years from today.
Why is it so difficult to move away from lead shot? Because you talk about a 5-year horizon for doing this, but you had a 5-year horizon from 2020. Why is it so hard?
Well, there's a number of aspects that come into play. So within the 2020 to 2025 period, we had COVID, where no one could go out. Not very many businesses functioned. We could not engage with people. Following that, we've got the war in Ukraine, and many people don't realise that, for instance, steel shot is used with what's called a double base powder, the propellant. That propellant is also used in military grade weapons. There's currently a shortage of that, and therefore there is restrictions on components coming into this country.
Some people will be saying, well, look, it clearly didn't work as a voluntary thing. So now a ban should come in, because otherwise we'll be having this same conversation in years to come.
Indeed, many will say that, of course. And ultimately, if the Health and Safety Executive propose a ban with the timelines that they've suggested, we will work alongside them. We will work alongside the government and with our ministers to continue to support our members to make sure that we've got the right products in place so that when any restrictions or legislations are enforced, we can continue to undertake the significant work that we do in the countryside.
Terry Behan from Basque. That's it from us. I'm Charlotte Smith. The producer is Heather Simons, and Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.